Before the lines were drawn in ink, before the maps were torn, Africa stood with open hands the night before the storm.
Kings and scholars, drums and law, trade winds crossed the sea. They were not lost, they were not wild, they were a
The scramble never ended. Venezuela, US power, and why Jamaica and the Caribbean must pay attention. Before Africa was divided by foreign hands, it was a continent of kingdoms, universities, trade routes, and living systems of law. But in the late 19th century, something happened, planned far from African soil, that permanently altered the fate of millions. An entire continent was carved up, not through war on African land, but through signatures on paper, through meetings in foreign capitals, through power deciding for people who were not present. Many Jamaicans were taught this as distant history. But today, as the world watches events unfold in Venezuela, we must ask a difficult question. Are we watching the return of a world where power decides who gets removed, who gets ruled, and who gets to call it order? Africa was never empty. It was never waiting to be civilized. Before colonization, Africa had empires such as Mali, Songhai, Benin, and Ethiopia. It had systems of law, governance, and scholarship. It had universities older than many in Europe. It had global trade routes linking Africa to Asia and the Middle East. This matters profoundly to Jamaica. Our ancestors were taken from functioning societies, not chaos. What was destroyed was not just land, but memory, stability, institutions, and systems. When Africa was destabilized, the Caribbean became the extension of that disruption through forced labor, plantation economies, and racial hierarchies designed to extract value outward. In 1884, European powers met at the Berlin Conference. 14 European nations and the United States sat around a table and divided Africa. No African kings were invited, no chiefs, no elders, no scholars. Borders were drawn with rulers across maps, cutting through ethnic groups, languages, families, and trade routes. Africa was not at the table. Africa was on the menu. The United States did not claim African colonies in the same way as Europe, but it endorsed the system, observed it, and learned from it. That logic would later travel into the Caribbean and Latin America. After Africa was carved, the Caribbean became strategic ground. Sugar, labor, shipping lanes, military positioning. For the United States, the Caribbean was not a neighborhood. It was a sphere of influence. Through occupations, pressure, and economic control, outcomes were shaped in Haiti, Cuba, Grenada, Panama, and in Jamaica through debt, trade dependency, and financial conditionalities. The message was consistent. Sovereignty was permitted only as long as it aligned with external interests. This was not accidental. It was inherited logic. After 2 world wars devastated humanity, the world tried to draw a line. In 1945, the United Nations was formed. At its core was the UN Charter, a promise that the age of empire would end. The Charter established principles meant to protect humanity: respect for national sovereignty, non-intervention in domestic affairs, prohibition of force except in self-defense, collective security through international agreement. In simple terms, no country should remove another country's government by force. No nation should rule another because it is powerful. War should not be a shortcut to political outcomes. The world said never again, but principles only matter when they restrain the powerful. After World War II, the world tried to stop power from deciding everything. That is why the United Nations was created, and why its founding document, the UN Charter, matters so much today. The UN Charter sets very clear rules. First, what is allowed? A country may use force only in 2 situations. 1, self-defense. If a country is under armed attack, it has the right to defend itself. 2. Collective international action, when the UN Security Council authorizes force to protect international peace. That's it. Now, what is forbidden? The UN Charter forbids invading another country to remove its government, occupying a country to run it until outsiders decide it is ready, using military force to control resources, bypassing international approval because a country is powerful. In simple terms, no nation has the legal right to rule another, no matter the justification. These rules exist because history showed us what happens when power replaces law. And for Jamaica and the Caribbean, this matters deeply, because when rules are ignored, small nations lose protection first. Now we arrive at Venezuela. According to official U.S. statements, a large-scale strike was launched on Caracas. The Venezuelan president and his wife were captured and removed from the country. The U.S. president publicly stated that the United States would run Venezuela until a proper transition of power could take place. This is not diplomatic pressure. This is not mediation. This is direct intervention. It is being justified with familiar language: restoring order, fighting crime, protecting democracy, stabilizing a region. But here is the question the UN Charter forces us to ask. Who decides when a sovereign country no longer governs itself? Was the UN Security Council authorized? Was collective consent obtained? Were international legal processes followed? Or did power decide first and law come later? This moment is not about personalities, it is about precedent. The UN Charter exists precisely to prevent this scenario, because once a powerful nation can say, "We will run your country until we decide you are ready," then sovereignty becomes conditional. And conditional sovereignty is not sovereignty at all. History tells us what happens next. Resources become leverage. Transitions stretch indefinitely. Military presence becomes normalized. And smaller states learn that rules protect them only when convenient. This is how the world slips, not suddenly but quietly, back into empire. For Jamaica and the wider Caribbean, this is not abstract. Our region has lived this cycle before. Foreign powers deciding what is best. Economic pressure replacing self-determination. Intervention framed as rescue. Resistance labeled instability. When international law weakens, small states lose protection first. Flights are cancelled. Trade routes are disrupted. Energy security is shaken. Tourism, shipping, and regional movement are affected. What happens in Venezuela does not stay in Venezuela. Precedents travel. The Scramble for Africa used words like civilization, development, order. Today's interventions use words like stability, democracy, security, different century, same structure. When power overrides law, rules become optional and the world returns to permission instead of principle. And permission is never applied equally. This moment could change the world. If the rules of the UN Charter are bypassed without consequence, then the rules themselves weaken. If one nation can remove another's leadership and declare stewardship, then others will follow, each with their own justifications. Africa has seen this story. The Caribbean has lived it. Latin America remembers it. The question now is not whether the world has rules, but whether those rules still matter. Africa was divided before rules existed. The UN Charter was written so that would never happen again. What unfolds now, especially in Venezuela, will test whether that promise still holds. Jamaica and the Caribbean must pay attention, not because we are powerful, but because rules are the only shield small nations have. When rules collapse, power fills the vacuum, and history has already shown us who pays the highest price. If this video helped you understand the connection between Africa, the Caribbean, Venezuela, and the global rules of war, like and subscribe, share, because understanding history is how small nations survive big decisions.
before the lines were drawn in ink, before the maps were torn, Africa stood with open hands the night before the storm.
Kings and scholars, drums and law, trade winds crossed the sea. They were not lost, they were not wild, they were a people free.
The paper cut, then men sat down in distant rooms where Africa wasn't there. They carved the land with rulers straight and called the fair fair. No voices heard, no names were read, no elders in the hall. They signed away a continent and said it helped us all. The scramble never ended, the scramble never ended. It just changed its name. Different suits, same hunger, different flags, same game. When power speaks louder than truth and law is pushed aside, a small feel every wave that breaks from the strong man's tide. Across the middle they crossed the sea in iron chains from homes they could not keep, but memories sailed with every soul that cried itself to sleep. In Jamaica, drums still spoke what books would not allow. The Maroons knew the old world lived in resistance then and now. When Africa was broken first, the Caribbean learned that sugar fed the distant crowns while islands slowly burned. They said order, they said peace, they said this is the way. But sovereignty was always thin when outsiders would stay. The scramble never ended, the scramble never ended. It just learned new words. Stability, democracy, but never what we heard. When guns decide what votes cannot, and oil speaks louder than law. The past steps out of history and knocks on now. The promise of rules after wars that scarred the world. They said this must not stand. They wrote down rules for every state, so power would be planned. No nation runs another land, no force without consent. The charter stood as warning sign of where destruction went. Now planes fly low in foreign skies, a president is gone. They say we'll run your country now until the dark is done. They say it's for the people's good, they say it's just this once. But history leans forward slow and asks us what this costs. If rules can bend for one today, who bends them next tomorrow? Small islands know this lesson well. We've lived inherited sorrow, and big waves move the ocean floor. It's not the ships that drown, it's the quiet shores that disappear when law is taken down. This
They wrote the rules so power would stop, so none would rule alone. If we forget why they were made, the past becomes our